All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Restoring Rapport podcast. This is episode 19, and I've got a really special episode planned out for you guys today. Before we get into it, thank you so much for choosing this show to listen to out of all that you could listen to today. A lot of people listen when they're in the car, when they're working out, when they're cleaning house, and you can listen to anything you want, music, audiobooks, other shows. We're really grateful that you chose this to listen to today. On the show today, I have a guest speaker. His name is Jeremy Pryor. He is an author, a multi-generational team leader. He's written several books. One of them is called 31 Creative Ways to Transform Your Family. He's also got several coming out, The Father's Compass and Family Revision. And a lot of what Jeremy talks about through family teams is this idea that family as we know it today is kind of a failed experiment, and it's looking to see what we need to change in order to prevent the train wreck that we're kind of headed for as a country when it comes to family. So I've listened to Jeremy and Jeff for so many years now, and I really appreciate all that they do. They have several shows. The Dad's Building Teams podcast is a great one. The Family Teams podcast is another great one. 5 Minute Fatherhood, great short little clip episodes for you guys to listen to. And there's just so many good tips in there for preserving family connection. So as we get started, just thank you so much for being on the show, Jeremy. It's an honor to have you here.
Thanks, Seth. Yeah, excited to be here. Love talking about this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, the subject that we're going to talk about is integrated living and the family structure of integrated living, because it's not really a common way of living today. I know that Mr. Jeremy has a lot of experience. Well, first of all, in his firsthand life, how he lives with his family, but also working with families who want to live a more integrated lifestyle than this nuclear family ideal that we have in the country today of mom, dad, 2 kids, separated from grandparents, separated from extended family. And maybe that we're just kind of on this show, we're asking, maybe that's not the best way. And is there a better way? And what does that look like? So, Jeremy, just before we get started, could you share just a little bit about yourself, kind of what your vision is, your mission is? For those of you who don't know, Jeremy is the co-founder of Family Teams, which is an organization directly for helping families. So can you just share a little bit about what your vision is for families today?
Yeah, so we're trying to ask and answer a question I think that very few people ever ask, and that is, what is the family? This is something that almost everyone thinks that we know the answer to. It's obvious, right? I mean, we've grown up in families for the most part. We're a part of families. But one of the things that we can obviously see in our culture is that family is in crisis and that there's something fundamentally flawed in the structure. And so we've kind of come all the way back to first principles and said, okay, wait. Do we really know what this is? Yeah. And so as we've asked that question, and really studied what the Bible has to say about family, we've come to conclusions that I guess are just not aligned totally with the way the Western world thinks about family.
Yeah.
That there's underlying design that we're actually violating, that needs to be restored. And so Family Teams is just an organization that, we're trying to get the word out. There's a biblical architecture for family that is being ignored, and that is going to predictably lead to the kinds of problems and failures that we see rampant in our culture today.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great answer. What's kind of how did you guys start? How did you guys go about starting this huge, I don't want to say huge in the sense of like billion-dollar corporation huge, but huge in the sense of brand new vision? Because I focus on the family would be the most similar company that I've really seen to you guys, and you're very different. Both of you do have kind of a different vision. So how did you guys go about starting something that new?
Yeah, well, I mean, a big part of it is that I think there's a lot of people who are trying to strengthen the family as it currently exists.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to get the word out that there's a different architecture or different sort of idea of family that the Bible has. It's not a springboard for individual success, but it's a multi-generational team on mission. And so a big part of what we're trying to do is give people an understanding. We're not trying to like solve every problem. Like, there's marriage enrichment, there's parenting classes, there's lots of great tools that exist out there for families. But what we're doing is really unique. And so part of what's different about it is we're trying to, use every, kind of all the sort of technological means we have to just make people as aware as we can. Like a lot of this comes like, as I think about for myself personally, what would be at stake had I not been exposed to this idea of family. I would be so different as a father, and
Wow.
my approach to my family would be so different. And so that really causes me to have just a ton of energy, just to like, I want guys to know, I want dads and moms and people that to be aware that there's
Yeah.
just a huge difference in the way you can view family, and that can really change how you design your family, how you think about family, how you practice family. And so part of it's the biggest part is just getting the word out, and then giving people some of the first few tools for building this kind of a family.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about on this show goes back to the idea that family is kind of the most basic building block of a society, of a culture. And if you really mess that up, you're not going to have a solid foundation, and you're not going to have a solid structure. Yeah, so that's great. And just again, people are already going to be kind of listening now, are already going to be very familiar with kind of your what you say and everything regarding family, because we've used you guys as a source so many times on the show. We just really appreciate your work. What can you just explain, though, in layman's terms, kind of what the difference is between the nuclear family that we've talked about, that's just kind of the mom, dad, a few children separated from extended family? Can you explain the difference between that and like a multi-generational family that you guys discuss at family teams, where you're on a mission together, and it's more broad?
Yeah. So the Western idea of family really is completely obsessed with the individuals as opposed to the group. And so what we oftentimes see in our culture is a really good family is one in which the individuals are successful. So if you were to talk to somebody and they're say, hey, let's say somebody's in their 50s and their kids have grown, and they're like, yeah, my son is, in this career and lives in this state, and my daughter's got married and she's doing this, and then my other child, like all the stories are individual stories.
Yeah.
And that's the way they think about what it means to build a good family. It's like, did we do a good job of launching? We even use these words, launching our kids. And once their kids are launched, we have an empty nest. Why? Because they're birds and they leave the nest. So,
Yeah.
that's the way we think of family, and we tend to break that down into like the nuclear family tends to be the unit that is primary in that vision of family. So that's one idea of family. The other idea is that the family was designed to be a team to work together. It doesn't mean that everyone's forced to do everything together, but it does mean that the actual design of the family is so that there are productive things that we're trying to do and accomplish as a team.
Yeah.
And that's really what we see in God's heart when he made the first family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he had a massive job that he describes in Genesis 1 to do. And so when he launched the first family, created the first family, he made this family, gave the family a mission. He said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule.
Yeah.
These were things that these responsibilities given to the family as a team. And the team had to be multi-generational, because you can't, fill the earth and subdue it with just Adam and Eve and a few kids. It needed to be a multi-generational family. So the idea is that idea that the family is actually designed to be a multi-generational team with a mission is what the family is actually designed with that architecture. Then it makes a lot of sense of why the roles of father, mother, son, daughter, grandfather, grandmother, why the extended family exists, why the family roles exist, why the covenant is for life. All of the different things that we take for granted that are a part of the family's, that sort of the different elements of family, make a lot of sense if the family is a multi-generational team on mission. They don't make a lot of sense if the real vision of the family is just to be a springboard for the individual success. Because of course, why not separate the family when our individual goals begin to divide the family? And of course, in our culture, we do separate at that point, because we don't really understand what would be the purpose of keeping this thing together if the goal of, or the vision of the structure is for our individual success.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm currently enrolled in a local college for an early childhood education degree. And that is a underlying theme in Gen Z, I believe, is get anything out of your way that's limiting you as an individual. And often a lot of those things we talk a lot about on the show about how not all limitations are bad, and family sometimes is that confine, that thing that keeps you stable and structured to what truly matters. And a lot of what you guys do is about that, just thinking not just about yourself and not just about, what you can achieve, what you can do, what you can grow in. It's about thinking, what can we do, like
Right.
shifting to the plural.
And to what your point, like when you hear a message like that, like get rid of everything in your life that is getting in the way of you as an individual.
Yeah.
Nobody says that when you join a team.
Right.
Like if you're part of a football team or basketball team, people don't say, hey, if anyone in this team is getting in your way, get rid of them. Like it doesn't make any sense. So there's a pre-existing question you have to ask, which this is kind of the whole point. We don't ask this question, which is, what is it? Because if it is just a group of individuals, then what you described as get rid of things that are getting in the way of your individual success, that's a really good idea. Like if you're an individual and you're participating, let's say in a club, you're not in a team, or you join a school, then those aren't teams. And if they're actually hindering your individual success, go to a different school, quit the club. Like it doesn't make sense to keep sacrificing for this thing.
Right.
But of course, if you join a team, and the whole premise of the team is that we're here, we succeed together, then that's just not an appropriate question to ask from the very beginning. The question is, how do we function better as a team? How do we succeed as a team? How do my individual skills and opportunity, how do they help further the team? Those become the questions you ask. And so that's why we have to, there's a first order question we're not asking, and that is this a team or not? And depending on your answer to that question, it will really change the way you respond to how you function as an individual with regards to that team.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's something that America needs to answer. Are we an individual? Because if so, we're doing a great job. And are we a family? If so, we might need to change some things. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's true. What are some of the reasons that families are opting for the convenience of this micro family structure today instead of, and they're kind of hitting the reset button every generation instead of developing into these expansive dynasties? Why are we doing that? What's the appeal? What's the draw, do you think, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I would say that it's something that happens very naturally. And we it's not really a decision we made as much as it's something that it's a part of what happens when you have what sociologists call the assumption of stability. So you can imagine if you lived in a society in which every couple of years bandits would attack, and there were diseases that were constantly coming through and wiping out half the tribe, and there was the potential for starvation, and it's likely to have a famine that's life-threatening every 10 to 20 years. Everyone would live like a multi-generational family team on mission. Everyone. You have to. It's a matter of survival. Because it'd be crazy to say, okay, well, we're all going to die if we separate, but let's separate, just see what like you can't think of yourself as an individual in a context in which there's that much danger. But if you are in a society where you assume you're going to be fed, you assume all of these things are going to happen, and they have happened for the last 50 or 100 years, and you think they're going to happen for the next 50 or 100 years, well, then you start to think of yourself more as an individual. Why would I want to sacrifice for this? Because I can survive. And so the underlying reason why I would sublimate my desires and values for the sake of the group, they get disrupted because I don't need to sublimate those desires or values to survive. So what happens in that context is you have to have a bigger why to stay together. And and the problem with that is you have to construct that as a family. And if you don't, then it does make logical sense for this thing to fall apart and to break up into its individual atoms. They call it the atomization of culture. It's just things start to fragment when there's not a gravitational pull at the center. And so you have to decide if the gravitational pull isn't survival, like it has been for the last 5,000-10,000 years, at least, then what is the gravitational pull? Right. And you have to then decide, is there a vision or mission? Does this team have a reason that is so strong and compelling that would cause us to continue to work together as a team and potentially sacrifice some of our individual desires for the sake of the group? And And so that I don't think that anybody should be forced to do that. I think that that is it. But the problem is we're not asking that question, and we don't understand that family was designed with that assumption in mind. The assumption that we do believe that there's something, that we're greater than the sum of our parts. That there's something great about working together across generations, and that it's that. What I really want to encourage people to do is just even consider that, and not necessarily to assume that, but to consider that if you're going to start a family, start having children, or you're part of a family and you're building this, why not consider the idea of putting at the heart of your family a mission so compelling and important that it creates that gravitational pull that you get to function as a team, because there's something so beautiful about that experience and what it does for each member of the family.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there would be very many people at all who would argue that individuals themselves are stronger than a team. I mean, it's just kind of a common sense, idea that teams are stronger and therefore they're more important. So why don't we start acting more like a teams within our family instead of more like a collection of individuals all going different directions? Love that concept. I also love how you pointed out that this is not something that we've actually chosen. It's something that we've stopped rowing and we've just kind of got carried along in the current to this place because of all um, the almost the industrialization and the way that our culture has made things so easy for the individual, so easy to kind of do your own thing and go at your own way. You guys have talked about in the past how it was easier for multi-generational families in the era of agriculturalism because families were more focused on survival. They were more focused on how are we going to put bread on the table in order to live, versus now it's how are we going to get our kids to college age and then have enough money for them to get a degree and then build their own individual success. So can you what are some of the ways that the shift from agriculturalism to individualism have affected the family?
Yeah. Well, you can imagine, so 75% of people lived on farms at the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And before that, it was even greater. And this is just true for all of human history. The average person lived on a farm, lived in sort of a team in which every single member of the team was very valuable for producing food, for producing income, for producing protection. And so you had this team culture that was just sort of baked in to the way that that kind of agrarian culture was designed. And so, yeah, we haven't gotten over the Industrial Revolution yet, which was basically we're going to create these, factories or corporations that act almost like factories. Mm-hmm. And that what it means to have a job or a career is to be a cog in that machine and to be a part of that team. And so what occurred was that people, they lived their lives in and through their family teams just naturally. Their work integrated very naturally with their family life. And now work is disintegrated from family life. And so these two teams often compete with each other. Yeah. So when you're going off to work and you're joining a team at work to try to make a living, and you're coming home to kind of rest and have some recreation before you go back to your team that you're spending 40, 50 hours a week with, that kind of thing is going to have an impact on the family.
Yeah.
And it confuses the family greatly. It's like, well, are we a team? Like, do we need each other? We don't actually produce anything of value. We just kind of recreate together. And so so what you do is you start to just see the shrinking of the strength of the family, the purpose of the family, the roles of the family, the things that the family was just designed to do and be. And so you can imagine in that agrarian culture, caring for elderly parents, it would make a lot of sense. I mean, we're all here doing different roles anyway. So one of the roles, so everything's so integrated. Somebody's going to go off and, plant some crops today. Somebody else is going to take care of, grandma and grandpa. Like it's like everything can be integrated in that way. Parenting was integrated with work as well. And so, yeah, we don't know what to do in this post-industrial world we live in. It's a very confusing situation.
Yeah, for sure. You guys covered in the 5-Minute Fatherhood podcast, it's one of the most profound episodes I've ever heard in any podcast series. And it's only 5 or 6 minutes long, which is really impressive to me. But you guys read an article by Trevin Wax, and it was the article, A Man's Place is in the Home. And you talked about how, I'm going to read a quote from it here in a second, but it was basically how in the agricultural world, your family, each member is working as a team, and even the children and each spouse are not impersonal employees like in a business, but they're actually bringing that family element to their putting bread on the table. And that's something that I think we've kind of lost in today's world, because often the dad goes to work, the mom goes to work, the kids go to their work, the public school. And it's like the home is just kind of sitting dormant while the individuals are out doing things and different things, not for the sake of the family, but for the sake of the individual. Like you said, it's almost like the team value has gotten lost and the new values of the industrialism have come in. So I love that you said that. Just really quick here, I'm going to read this article by Trevin Wax. He says, we may never be able to return en masse to the farms or workshops, but there is value to be had merely in mourning for what has been lost, which process reminds us of what might yet be. A man working his own fields was his own master, the sweat of whose brows was poured out directly, visibly in creating a home. His partner was not an impersonal investor, but flesh of his flesh and bone of his bone. The subordinates alongside whom he toiled were not querulous strangers, but were his own children, fruit of his loins. This is what has been lost in the 2-century-long transformation of house as home into house as way station, that luxurious modern repository for food, a bed, and distraction, barely inhabited by a loosely knit community of transients, for the sake of which we shoulder a lifetime servitude to debt. And when I heard you guys read that article, I mean, he's obviously a very good writer, but my worldview was changed just in that one moment. It was almost like how, as a believer, I would describe the salvation experience of a moment. It was like the scales fell off the eyes, and it was like there's something we're missing by separating and spending 8-hour workdays apart from each other. And that's why a lot of families have difficulty integrating to the point where they can sustain themselves financially together without leaving each other all day. But I know that it's possible. Can you give me some examples I know you guys as a family live a very integrated life. How have you kind of managed that in the financial world?
Yeah. So one of the really good news, I think, in this conversation is that it's actually, I think, far easier in the economy where that's emerging to integrate family than it was 50 years ago. So like both of my grandpas worked for Ford their entire life, and retired with pensions from Ford. And back then there were giant corporations that basically were providing families with their primary means. And it was very difficult to do entrepreneurial endeavors at that, especially at scale. It was very costly. And there was a much more of a winner-take-all sort of industrial environment back then, when we were more of a manufacturing economy, because you had to create such capital-intensive factories in order to produce income and compete in the global market.
Yeah.
Now that's changing. There are so many different industries you can get involved in that are much smaller today, in our current economy. And so, we've started, I think 7 different businesses over the course of our family's life. We had, an e-commerce business for a long time. I was so excited. This was really back when Amazon first started. We started our first e-commerce business. There was such a proliferation of e-commerce businesses. They unfortunately, a lot of us got stomped out as Amazon went beyond books and got into everything else. But man, it was an awesome season. That's where I learned a lot of business things, and there's still a huge opportunity within e-commerce. Then we got into internet marketing, and because there were just new platforms that were popping up, it felt like every couple months, that needed to be sort of reverse engineered and considered, and we could offer basic marketing services for companies, and make a living that way. And we did that for a number of years. We were involved for 12 years in animated video production, which was another very easy to low barrier to entry opportunity for us to produce creative videos for lots of companies and for different movements. And then we've gotten involved in real estate, and we've taken some of our earnings from other business models that were a lot lower barrier to entry, and we've gotten involved in these more capital intensive opportunities, like buying real estate that's distressed, and then rehabbing and renting those things. My wife and daughter and my mother-in-law started a quilt shop not the most, profitable business model in the world, but it's like we kind of are at a point now as a family where we can engage in, some of these other business models as well, that, might not provide a full income for a family, but for us are very meaningful because they allow us to work together and work with our community. And we found ways via online also to really increase the profitability and revenue of some of these businesses. So there are just so many opportunities now to do this. And so I think that's the good news, and what Trevin Wax is describing there of lamenting what happened. That we live in a day and age, people can choose lifestyle. There's a lifestyle design choices, and so a lot of people going into college, they're asking, what kind of career do I want as an individual? Man, I wish people would say, okay, they'd ask a question before that, and that is, do I want to work with my family? Do I want to work with my spouse? Do I want my kids, as they're getting older, to offer opportunities for us to work together as a team, when they want to, or when they launch off and start businesses or ministries or other initiatives that they would create things in which we could support them, work with them, further, the different assignments and callings and passions they have. So we're really entering almost a golden era of being able to get beyond, either subsistence farming that was happening, for most of human history, or this kind of time where you had to, 95% of city dwellers had to just sort of, involve themselves in a giant industrial economy they couldn't hope to have a piece of. We're living in a day and age in which there's just so much technological disruption going on, that you can find little pockets of the economy and make a good living and work as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main questions that I asked myself upon entering college was, I would like a job that provides me the possibility to stay at home, spend the majority of my time at home with my family. And because of that, I chose teaching, because summers often long weekends. However, even then, you still leave the home for that 8-hour period of the time. And ideally, I would like to work with my family exactly how you're describing, as a unit, kind of moving together. And it sounds like a lot of the ways you mentioned you guys had done that were possible because of the internet and the recent advances in like online marketing and things like that. One of my mentors has gotten into e-commerce through Amazon, and she's very successful at it. And it just, that kind of thing is a real inspiration to me, just for the exact reason you pointed out. That wasn't possible, 70 years ago. So I'm really glad that, first of all, technology can be an aid to the family. We talk a lot about today how technology can be a devastation to the family. Jeff Bethke's written lots of books for you guys out there. One of them was To Hell with the Hustle. He talked a lot about the hyperconnectivity of the world today, and how social media is causing us to see each other as less than human and these things. But there's also the flip side of that coin, where we can, as families, use this technology to actually work together rather than separate in order to live. So I love that you pointed that out. That's a great thing for our listeners to know. Can you briefly break down kind of the benefits of a multi-generational living that can't be replicated by a nuclear family? Because I know a lot of people would say, my family, we have a nuclear family, it's great, I don't see any problems with it. What are some things that the multi-generational family has to offer that can't be replicated by the nuclear family?
Yeah. Well, I think that the generational wisdom is a huge a sense of roots that children will have if you have generational connections. There is a crisis in our culture with young people of being of identity, like not knowing who they are and being told, you're just going to figure it out yourself. Good luck with that. Go find yourself, and just wandering for a decade or or more, trying to figure like that. That is all a result of the decision to devalue our generational connections. Those kinds of crises did not exist. Then, of course, you have just very practical things, like there are seasons of the family that are very physically demanding, and so to have extended family available to help care for young children, we're famous for saying it takes a village, and by that, of course, we mean daycare and nannies and lots and lots of and those things. You have to almost create a serving class of workers to be able to sustain the challenge of raising a young family alone as a nuclear family. It's really not, it's not designed for us to be able to do this by ourselves. So There's also just, sometimes when we think about that, because if you're not somebody who's, if you're starting this new in your generations, you can, there are some benefits you're not going to get that your future
Right.
generations. Another example is, imagine what it was like, in these agrarian cultures in which, people, they paid off their 100 acres. It took them 5 generations. And so
Mhm.
there was enormous sacrifice made by the previous generations. And then what's the benefit of living this way? Well, man, you get 100 acres, like
Yeah.
work, and now
Wow.
you can have some freedom as a family from the dangers and subsistence of life.
Yeah.
And I think that could also be true today. Like, what if our children were given the ability to, and there's a problem, of course, going on right now in our economy, which is that young people are coming out of college an enormous amount of debt
Yeah.
while wages are stagnant and housing prices are exploding. What a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Now, if you expect every single generation to hit the reset button and be able to pay off that school debt and to, take those low wages and to buy houses that are exploding in value, that's a problem. But of course, if you're a part of a multi-generational family, or you take the hit in your generation for your future children, we can help each other get over these kinds of hurdles. We can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's so many ways in which this can help benefit. But you do have to it takes a little bit of imagination, because if you haven't seen it, um,
Yeah.
in play and seen the blessings that this can create, you might dismiss the amazing opportunities that this can create for your children and for your grandchildren.
Yeah, absolutely. Even setting aside those amazing financial benefits, I've heard an interview in the past where you talked about the just the social benefit of it. Because, for example, if there's a divorce in a nuclear family, that's kind of the end. I mean, the family's dissolved, basically. The kids are torn different directions. There's no support structure. Whereas if there's a death or a separation in a multi-generational home, there's hopefully another, father figure or mother figure to stand in and fill the breach there. So I love that you guys have talked about that. And along with what you said about the financial benefits, in another interview, I heard you recommend the movie Avalon, which I recently watched. Avalon, where it's a Jewish immigrant family who comes here and basically lives very integrated. And of course, by the end of the show, it did not go well for them. But by watching it, you can kind of see those pitfalls of that and kind of avoid those in the process of making your own multi-generational home.
Yeah, that
What's
movie, like it's kind of like The Lament.
it
It's like a
is?
movie version of
Yeah,
watching a family that is so beautiful in its multi-generational expression, but then gets just so disrupted by
yeah,
American culture that it falls apart towards the end. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
really cautionary tale for sure. It's a great movie.
They even sat down in one of the scenes and had like a family business meeting and discussed finances. And you guys have talked about in the past how yeah, I mean, when you have this multi-generational family, you've got 8 different incomes. I mean, because you have so many families in the home. Just financially, from a financial standpoint, that makes so much sense to combine and sacrifice that individualism, that autonomy, that independence for so much wealth when it comes to the collective whole. So I love that I think you guys said that you took all of that and bought privacy. So you have 4 kitchens,
Yeah.
but you still live integrated. But because of your collected finances, you can afford to even buy privacy. So I love that you guys pointed that out, because when I've presented the multi-generational home to families in the past, one of their concerns has been, I would still like to have my own introvert space, my own place to withdraw. And so I love that you guys have done that. What's some practical advice that you would give for families who are trying to live this communal integrated lifestyle, but they're having some trouble just practically knowing what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think it's critical to do it in stages and baby steps, because it's not. Sometimes what people do is they lurch to the end. They have a vision for total integration,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of reasons why that could be very toxic as well. So you have to be realistic and take steps, careful steps into integrating family members, and a lot of this does depend on if people are healthy, and we've worked out really good ways of resolving conflict, and
Hmm.
we find lots of alignment or not, with regards to how we view family life or work or our spiritual life. And so what we do, baby steps are, you start with time. So you're like in your rhythm. How much overlap do you want to have with your extended family. So, in our case, we do a Sabbath dinner on Friday night. And at first we didn't integrate anybody because we didn't know what we were doing. So we just tried
Yeah.
to just figure out if we could pull this off every week with our kids. But over time we would like once a month integrate, like my wife's parents, then once a month we integrate my parents. And then it just got more and easier. And as our relationships got healthier and healthier. And so we just for a number of years, we were doing a weekly family meal together.
Yeah.
And then we started integrating a couple more rhythms, ministry rhythms, work rhythms. My dad worked for me for a number of years. My father-in-law worked for, so we got to know each other, and we got to really enjoy each other and find that it wasn't toxic or, problematic. If we did, we would have backed off. But as more life and more, more grace was kind of on those experiences, then we would take another step. And so we just kept taking these steps until it was like, my parents now live here, in our kind of our multi-generational house.
Yeah.
And my nephews live with us, and lots of our rhythms are integrated. But even then we kind of do it one at a time. Like my mom, she cooks, dinner for us on Tuesday night. We do, my dad hosts a game night every Saturday night with, all of his grandkids, while April and I do our date night. These were all things that we just tried one little step at a time.
Yeah.
And, it's important to respect the relationship. The relationship is paramount. And it's really important that vision does not eclipse the relationship. Some people are so obsessed with a vision that they'll actually harm the relationships. They'll get so disappointed with, their children or their parents or whoever they're trying to integrate with, that it's like, guys, the point is that those relationships, you have to be really thoughtful and careful in stewarding those and taking these steps, taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. It's okay to retreat as well from things if it helps the relationship. So that's kind of how we've tried to approach it.
That's great. I mean, the name of this show, Restoring Rapport, that's exactly what we're about, is keeping relationships central with God and other people and getting rid of things that impede that. So I love that you said even vision can do that. Even vision can be an impediment. Even vision can be an obstacle to overcome. But not that vision is bad to have, but that vision, you just have to watch it. Yeah. I love that. It's great. That's a great point. A lot of times I've heard you guys talk a lot about Jewish feasts and kind of the table as a portal to the kingdom. I know you talk a lot about that on the Family Team's website, which, by the way, we will put in the show notes for you guys to access all of the resources that they have available there. Can you talk a little bit about how that began and why you found the table to be a unique and special place when it comes to building a family bond?
Yeah. Well, it is a big deal. I mean, in our culture, we talk mostly about the table with regards to like what I would just think of as the weekday dinner. It's like, which I think is very important, but it's like, we got to have a place to catch up. We're all going different directions. Kids are going to different schools, sports, work schedules. So let's have a place to kind of, sync up. But that's one way to think about the table. But there's also another experience, which is what really healthy families experience, like in our culture, maybe on a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, which is what it looks like when you have multi-generations around a table and you have the gift of time and you're just experiencing your familyness. And we don't do that very often. And we learned this from Jewish culture, because when we lived in Jerusalem, it was crazy how, on Friday, right before Shabbat, you would just see people just, streaming into their parents' houses, even if they were older, with their young children. And then all of a sudden the Shabbat siren would sound over Jerusalem. And if you listened really closely, what you would hear was the chanting of fathers over their children, blessings. And I was like, oh, that is a different kind of experience of family. And a lot of us just don't know how to create peak family experiences, but that really is related to learning how to steward the table to experience all the elements of the family. And so for us, we do that as well on a Friday night, where it's very timeless, our experience. We don't have anything planned. We're not rushing off to anything. We bless our kids. The oldest father blesses the sons. The oldest mother blesses the daughters. And in that experience, everyone at that table is a father, mother, son, or daughter. You are your family identity. Wow. And we live and play that out in the context of that meal, because we love those identities, and we want to sink our roots deep into what and at those meals, we tell family stories all the time. My mom just she worked for a week to to build up this slideshow about my grandpa who served in World War II, and he would have been, I think, 104. And so right at the time of his birthday, he died, over 20 years ago now. We read his poems, we shared his stories, we watched and our kids are like, really, tell us more. And I'm able to tell stories. My parents can tell stories. That's a very normal part of the way that we do Shabbat dinner on a Friday night. It's a place of creating that kind of rooted structure for our kids and our future generations.
Absolutely. I mean, putting myself in that position, I can imagine that would make you feel like a part of something, lasting, like a legacy, like you guys have talked about. And that just practically, I think of how the table is the perfect place to do that, because I mean, eating is a basic human need. You can't really escape that. You have to make time to eat. It's not something that's optional. So you can basically take that time where you're doing something you have to and use it to invest in your most visceral relationships. I love that. Can you briefly describe I want to give one more thought on that. I've heard Jeff Bethke talk about table as a place where you actually see part of God's heart that you wouldn't see other places. He mentioned that verse, the road to Emmaus, where the two men are walking with Jesus and they have no idea who he is until the moment where bread was broken, and then they recognize him. I love that, because I think there's something about satisfying that basic human need together that you can't actually, there's no other way to replicate that quality time, just like on a walk in the park or something. I think there's something really special about the table for sure.
It's where the story ends. It's like you think about the culmination when in the Bible they're trying to describe what the ultimate experience of relationship is going to be like, and at the end of Revelation it describes us being at a feast at a table.
Wow. It's true. The marriage supper. Love it. That's so good. Especially because I feel like, I mean, today a lot of times, because of the differentiated workplaces, you have the kids doing homework often in the evenings. You have the parents, relaxing or watching TV in the evenings, and it's like that space is getting lost. But in reality, it's something so pivotal for family health. I've also heard you guys talk about something I briefly want to go over: an annual family summit, where you guys kind of do a collective review over the previous year and kind of where you're going in the future. Can you basically just go over that a little bit and what that looks like for families?
Yeah. So for us, we like to do that right somewhere between Christmas and New Year's. And what we do is we schedule usually about a 24-hour summit. Sometimes we'll stay home, but in recent years, we usually get a hotel room for us and our kids. Wow, and we spend, so we just have different exercises. The first half of the summit, we look back. And so we have the kids go kind of quarter by quarter or month by month. And what are some of the highs? We have a bunch of questions that they can ask and answer about, things that have happened over the course of the last year, and really kind of piece that together into the kind of the flow of the year for them. And then we, have a really cool dinner. We usually eat out at a restaurant, and then just go around and spend 2 or 3 hours just letting the kids share, and me and April on that reflection. And then what we do is in the next morning, we do usually about 3 different sort of segments, go to different coffee shops and stuff where we have our kids write and share. So we just do a lot of vision sharing, goal setting, rhythm tweaking, a lot of those things. We just ask a lot of questions about what's working, what's not working in the family. What do we want to double down on this year? What do we want to, we want to kind of let go of this year? How do we feel about our family mission? How do we feel about our values? So a lot of evaluating, and I do a lot of writing during those summits, and then we make some decisions about where we're headed. And sometimes we've made some very big decisions about major rhythms, and for us, stewarding our weekly rhythm there's nothing almost more in terms of a big decision than that. If we're going to shift something that happens during the week, we commit to that for the next 52 weeks. That's a lot of reps of that activity, or not doing that activity. So that gets a lot of our attention during our summits.
Awesome. Yeah. Something I love about that particularly is that it gives everybody a job, something to do, down to the smallest child, because a lot of what I'm learning about in the education system today, where I'm learning how to educate K through 5 at 5th grade, actually, is that when you give a child a job in the classroom that's specifically designed for them and that they were kind of assigned based on their personality and skill set, they feel like a part of something greater. And I just love how you're capturing that with this family summit. You're making all of the family feel like a part of a unit, a part of a whole. I love that you're doing that through those. For the last couple of minutes of this interview, I just wanted to go over the benefits of marriage and family for men specifically, because 70% of this show's listeners are men. So I wanted to cover how basically multi-generational living affects men, and in particular, one of the articles that you covered in an interview, it was another great interview that you and Jeff did, Mr. Jeff did. It was The Nuclear Family Was a Mistake, that article by David Brooks, I believe. And one of the quotes he has in there is that, quote, extended families provided men with the fortifying influences of male bonding and female companionship. Today, many American males spend the first 20 years of their life without a father and the next 15 without a spouse. And then he goes on to point out that, quote, in the absence of the connection and meaning that family provides, unmarried men are less healthy, earn less, and die sooner than married men. And I think that's something that men particularly need to know today, because a lot of the people that I'm being exposed to who are my age, early 20s, marriage really isn't on their radar, much less integrated living. And so I'd just like to go over some of these, the benefits that you believe men would get specifically from having a family surrounding them at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the biggest one that David Brooks is describing and that you were talking about there is the collision between our culture's value for impulsive freedom versus meaning. That's really the collision. So if what our culture has been telling men is that what freedom is the ability to, at almost any moment, indulge your impulsive desires. Okay, that is not freedom historically. Freedom historically has been, in most cultures and every religion, is freedom from those impulsive desires towards something that's much more meaningful. That's actually the real battle that men are waging. But you can create a much better consumer if you can define freedom as the ability to indulge your impulsive desires. I mean, that creates the perfect consumer. And so we have been exposed to so many hundreds of thousands of advertisers. It's just like we are training men to think about freedom in this way. Yeah. And so, of course, children and marriage and mortgages and, oh my gosh, what a drag. Wouldn't it be better to be able to just grab a beer at any moment with your buddies and, not have to have any responsibility? And, I mean, that resonates with this very shallow idea of life that it's about that kind of impulsive freedom. It's not about meaning. So historically, if you grew up in a multi-generational family where you're hearing stories about your father and your grandfather and your great-grandpa, and you're like, this responsibility of this family line has been given to me. So I have to choose a spouse and, and basically I get to further. There's nothing more meaningful, besides your faith than that. And so it's like getting to be a part of that. If we're training men to pursue meaning, and that happiness, deep happiness, really comes from the experience of investing in meaningful things, and that you need to find ways to make sure that you are really free, and that is you're free to follow your best intentions and not your impulsive pleasures. That's what men really, really want. And I think that this is why we have this kind of trope in our culture that when you're on your deathbed, nobody says, I wish I would have worked more, or we say, no, you wish you would have spent more time with your family. Like we know that there's something really weird about the way we're thinking, but we don't know why it's so weird. And that's why I'm trying to sort of jackhammer into the root of that. And it's like, we believe a lie. It's very pernicious, very pervasive. This lie is that, men, somebody told me this, like when I was graduating from high school, somebody, kind of, grabbed me, by the shoulder and said, "Hey, Jeremy, just so you know, you're about to go to college, and like those are going to be the best years of your life, man. Like enjoy every minute of it." That's a terrible thing to tell young men, because the time when you have the least responsibility and the most freedom to indulge your impulses, that is the best years of your life, and everything's downhill from there. That is not the way the Bible describes the good life. That's why I love Psalm 128, which really describes the good life, which is, may you live to see your children's children. May your May your sons be like olive shoots around your table. May your wife be like a fruitful vine within your house. Thus is the man who is blessed by the Lord.
Wow. Yeah.
That is a totally different picture of the good life than, find a way to retire when you're 25 and just, indulge your hedonistic pleasures to your heart's content. That is not. But again, when you say it like that, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, I don't know if I believe that. But man, no, we actually do believe that.
Because of how we're acting. Yeah.
Our actions betray that that's what we really believe.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Particularly, I mean, men who live that way are kind of living a life devoid of purpose. They're not part of something bigger. They're not, and I would say that's reflected by, I'm writing an article now. I'm studying the health benefits of choosing marriage over singleness, and men in general just are so infinitely healthier than their unmarried peers when they're married. I mean, it's striking, and it's a part of that, the purpose in passing on that family name.
You're sacrificing for meaning. I mean, it's like we need meaning. We think we have it. We don't. We don't have enough meaning in our lives as men, especially when you're young. Like you need to pursue things that'll produce tremendous meaning, and things that are meaningful are hard. Like they're going to require sacrifice. And so that's the message we have to be telling young men, and that bearing up under that responsibility is a good thing. And you will not regret it if you choose to do that. But I think that this kind of gets back to the structural problem of family. And that is that I think so many young men have seen families fall apart. They've watched their dad or their friends' parents, their marriages fall apart, and they look at that and they're like, well, if that's what's meaningful, then maybe I am better off as a single person.
Yeah.
Because look at the devastation of families. And that's why it's like, man, that the reason why that is so pernicious is because of we have as a culture have adopted this backwards architecture. We don't know how to build families. We don't know what family even really was designed to be. And so working against the design for 10, 20, 30 years and watch it fall apart. If you use anything or abuse anything, in a wrong way for that long, it's going to fall apart. So we have to understand the underlying architecture of family so that you can actually, reliably invest your life in your family, and know that it will result in it's much more likely to result in greater meaning. We're all broken as families. There's always going to be struggles, but for it to self-destruct so consistently, that is new, and that is a big problem.
Absolutely. And that's why I so appreciate the work you guys are doing at Family Teams and recrafting the vision for family, redefining it. I love how you pointed out that products of a broken marriage, of broken families, will grow up to think that families and marriage are broken. That's because they come from that. So I love that you pointed that out. Remember, guys, I'm going to link the everything about Family Teams in the description. Something else that I wanted to point out that they do is the Skill of Fatherhood masterclass. It's a 3-part system of how to be a good father. You can register for that on their website. Also, they have a 5-minute fatherhood group that I'm part of, and I absolutely love to see the questions that pop up in there. It starts some really good discussions. And even on Instagram, they have Mr. Jeremy's made a lot of Instagram like books giving you ideas for how to do your Sabbath. So if you're interested in doing bringing the Sabbath into your family dynamic, Instagram is a great place to get those. Thank you guys so much for listening to this show. Once again, I just thank you so much, Mr. Pryor, for being on the show. It's been an honor to have you. Yeah. Like I said, it's really kind of a dream come true in the sense of I've been listening to you on other podcasts for years, and it's just great to actually talk to you face to face, get your input on my show, and broadcast that to all the young men listening to the show. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, Seth. Yeah, this is a great interview. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And remember, guys, if you have not gotten a copy of my books yet, you can do so through Amazon. The titles are Deep in the Dance of Dependence, Prioritizing Relationship Amidst Gen Z Individualism. And the other one is The Ponderings of a Homeschooler. You can get those on Amazon. Once again, I'll put the link in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.